All right, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, The Anatomy of a Great Home Inspector Website. Really excited to have you here during what we all call the marketing season, not the slow season. This is a great time for you to be investing in the knowledge that you need to have to be more successful or even more successful than you were this year, next year. So really appreciate you being with us. Websites are incredibly important. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. Number one, if you do have questions throughout this webinar, feel free, if you think of them, type them into the Q&A box. You'll see that in kind of your options in Zoom. So put that into Q&A. We probably will hold all those to the end, but if we do have something, we may pull one kind of during the webinar itself. Also, if you do have any issues, there's a chat box that you can go to, which may not be on, but I'll turn it on here in a second. So with that, want to hand it over to Olivia from the marketing team here at Spectora. You've probably seen Olivia on our other webinars. Fantastic SEO, amazing content writer, really knows the ins and outs of how to make a great home inspector website. So very excited to have her presenting today. I might pop in and out too as well in the webinar to add some color to some stuff. But super excited to have you here, Olivia, and I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. As James said, I'm Olivia. I'm on the Spectora marketing team, and we're so thrilled to have you here today. J2 covered all of the business-like stuff we need to get into, but again, if you have any questions or need anything, feel free to ask them through the webinar. And with that said, let's get into it. So today, what we're going to cover is, first of all, why you should care about your website. I assume a lot of you all know this if you're here today, but it's worth talking about anyway. And then we're going to really focus on the small things you can actually do to convert website traffic into booked inspections. We're going to go over some website pages that we think every home inspector's website should have, more or less. And then we're actually going to look at a real home inspector's website and look at what's working well, what could maybe be better, and then as always, we'll have some time for Q&A. So with that said, let's jump into why we should care about a website in the first place. So let's take it back a minute to how people are actually booking inspections with you, right? So if you have a home buyer, they're probably finding you for the most part in one of two ways. Option number one is they know they're buying a home, they're in the process, they're working with a realtor, and obviously you all work with realtors, and the realtor refers you. So that's way number one, a client might find you and get to the process of booking. The second way, which we're actually seeing more and more and might really see this year depending on the outcome of the National Association of Realtors lawsuit, is homebuyers actually searching directly for their home inspectors. So we know this is happening, right? Because I think it's about 50,000 people a month search home inspector near me in the United States, and that doesn't even count all the ones who are typing into Google like home inspector in my specific town. So there are a good number of people that are finding you probably just through Google. Why is this important? Whether they're booking you or finding you through a real estate agent or whether they're Googling you, they're almost definitely going to land on your website to book you, right? And so your website says a lot about you. Oftentimes, they're not going to meet you in person before they find you. So it's really their first interaction with you. And you want that website to encourage them to book an inspection. And so this is why we should care about our websites, why your websites really need to be good, represent your business and who you are, and answer any questions a home buyer might have. And yeah, with that said, let's get into how we actually do this. But first, just a couple quick notes on SEO and digital traffic. Mainly, we're not going to talk about SEO much in this webinar. We actually do have three previous webinars actually on SEO that we've done in the past. We'll link them in the post-webinar resources that we'll email out to you after this webinar. Yeah, it's just a whole different ballgame, and we don't have time to get into everything today, but it is important, and if you haven't seen those yet, we do recommend you go watch them. While we're not spending time talking about SEO and actually how to get traffic to your website, there is one quick thing I want to touch on, and it's that Google Analytics is going to be your best friend. So if you take one thing away from this webinar, I want you, each and every one of you, to set up a Google Analytics account and look at how people are getting to your website, when they're on your website, what pages they're visiting. You can see all of that. And you can even see how, like, where they're coming from. So if they're coming to your website from social media, if they're coming from Google, if they're coming from your Google My Business page or profile, that's really important to know, right? So that's something I want everyone to do. And that's the last thing I'll say about SEO today. So let's get into your actual site. So let's assume you are getting some traffic to your site. How do you convert that traffic into booked inspections? And this is really important, right? Because you can't just assume that anyone who finds their way to your website will immediately want to book with you. There are a couple things they'll need to know, like, can they trust you to do their inspection? What services do you actually offer? What do other people who have worked with you think about you? And all of these will lead into whether or not they actually choose to use you as their home inspector. And how you design your website actually does have a lot of influence on this. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a CTA, or a call to action. CTAs are probably the most important part of your website. And why is that? A call to action is how you'll actually get a home buyer to book an inspection. So if you've never seen a call to action, it's going to look like a little button, or literally something telling someone landing on your site to go to the next step. So let's talk about what a good CTA looks like. First of all, you'll want it to be eye-catching. So bright colors, easily readable font. All of that is important because if it doesn't stand out on your page, there's a good chance someone is going to skip over that CTA and not actually realize that that's what they need to click on, which leads me into point number 2, is that it should be really obviously clickable. And we'll look at examples in just a moment so we actually know what this looks like. But it might look like an actual button. And you see CTAs all the time, right? Like, we as humans who are on the internet know when we're supposed to click on something. So that's why it's important to make it look like all of those other CTAs that people are exposed to daily. And then the last thing is every call to action should have really clear language. And what does this mean? It means a viewer should know what to do next. So for example, if you're calling someone to book an inspection, you can use your CTA text as schedule an inspection, schedule today, book an inspection, etc. Just quickly, this, in case you're like, Olivia, what in the world are you talking about? I have no idea what a CTA is. I promise you do. I grabbed a few screenshots from actual inspection websites, but this is what they'll look like, right? And all of these, what I love about them, it's very clear, A, what the action you want someone landing on the site to take is. Schedule an inspection, schedule today, book online, schedule an inspection. And they're really popping off the page, right? Like, it's probably going to be one of the first things my eye is drawn to. So where should you put a CTA? The first answer is really on every page. So a client who lands on your site should be able to book an inspection from any page of your website they land on. So, okay, I lied. This is not going to be the last time I mention SEO, but say, for example, that your homepage is ranking on Google, but you also have a blog post ranking on Google, right? And let's say someone, you have a blog post titled, "What can I expect from my home inspection?" And a home buyer's typing that into Google, they land on your blog post. You want them to be able to book an inspection from there as well, right? So the point of CTAs is we're making it really easy to turn someone landing on your website into someone who actually books an inspection. So just a little marketing humor quickly. This is my best landing page so far. I have managed to fit in 124 calls to action. You don't need 124, but it is definitely important to have a couple throughout the page. And so I'd say the bare minimum, if your website has a scrolling header, you'll want that call to action to schedule an inspection to scroll with someone throughout the page. And I would say this is probably the bare minimum. At least they'll see it once. But ideally, you'll have CTAs, especially on high intent pages, so like your inspection or services and fees, scattered throughout the page. And I really want James to talk a little bit about why laying them out like this is important, because the way people read will actually affect where they're most likely to notice those CTAs and where to click.
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. So this comes down to the concept of how people actually look at web pages. We talked about this on the email marketing webinar. So if you're on that, awesome. And also apologies, you're going to hear it again, but it's super, super important. And I think the thing that you have to remember is, and pay attention when you do this too. When you go to a website, you do not read every word on the page, right? It's not like reading a magazine article. What you're doing is you're skimming, you're trying to find information as quickly as possible, and then you're going to move on if you don't find what you're looking for. And the way that people actually read is in an F shape. So if you look at this page and you think of the letter F, probably the first thing that they're going to do is either scan that header section up at the top, or they're going to scan that masthead that says you're not just buying an inspection. Now, you notice in this case, when you're making that F-shape motion, let's say through the header and then through that masthead piece, you're always going to kind of end up at a call to action. And that's awesome, right? You're trying to get people to see those and understand, okay, I can schedule this today. I can do this right now. And then as their eyes go down, as they're searching for a little bit more information, there's yet another call to action sitting there right in front of their face. And that is really important to think about of how people consume a website. And as we go through this, and Olivia's talking you through the different page elements, and the different pages that you have on your website, just remember that people are not going to read right away. They're going to scan. They're trying to make the decision if it's worth their time to look. And it is that F shape that they're going to continue to do. So very important there. And then one other concept that I do want to talk about is one of the best parts about sort of websites and online marketing is you kind of capture the entire experience in the screen, right? And if you think about, let's say, a billboard, and you see a billboard for a sandwich shop, well, you're either going to have to go to the website of the sandwich shop or drive to the sandwich shop. You're kind of leaving one medium to go to another. The nice thing with digital marketing is you're keeping people in the digital realm, and your goal should always be to tell them what to do next. And so think about that too with your calls to action. Schedule today. You're telling them, hey, do this, schedule today. And when they go and they schedule and they've kind of completed that process, maybe there's something else you ask them to do. That could be reading an article on what to expect from your home inspection. But you want to keep taking people down a path, and you have them, once you have them kind of clicking on buttons and on your website, you have the opportunity to continue to get them to do things you want them to do that will make either them book an inspection, or after they book an inspection, make that inspection go better. So just keep that in mind. And with that minor rant, thank you, Olivia. I'll pass it back off.
No, that's absolutely excellent. Thank you for that, James. And that really ties in what we're going to talk about it today in really matters a lot when you're thinking about getting someone who lands on your website to actually book an inspection, is the way they will move through your website. So that perfectly leads us into, you want your website to have easy navigation. And as I was thinking about what easy navigation actually means, I think the best way to think about this is what questions would a potential client who lands on your website want the answers to? And then also, as James said, where do you want them to go next? Right? So let's think through someone who's actually going to book a home inspector, who wants to get an inspection from one of you watching today, right? What questions would they want the answers to? So you all might know this better than me, but as I was thinking through this, if I was booking a home inspection, the first thing I would want to know is, what services does this company provide and what will they cost? Because I probably have at least some idea, even if I'm a new home buyer, what services I might need. So let's say I want a home inspection, just a residential home inspection. Okay, I want to know all about that, what's included in that, and what I will be paying for that. And then let's say, I'm a slightly more knowledgeable home buyer and I know about Radon and SewerScope, or any other services you have. I'll probably be looking for that as well. So once I've established that, yes, the home inspection website I've landed on actually offers a home inspection and anything else I'm looking for, second question I might ask is, why should I trust this company? And this is a big one, right? Because I think it's something like over 99% of people read online reviews, and about 50% of people actually trust online reviews as much as they trust a recommendation from friend or family. So when I'm looking at a home inspector's website as a potential client, I'm really going to be looking to see if other people have had a good experience working with them. And let's say I'm able to establish that trust. My next question might be, okay, how can I book an inspection? And that's important. You know, we just talked about having calls to action to schedule an inspection all throughout your website. But you might even have a more dedicated booking page even. And actually, if you use Spectora, which all of you do, you can embed your online schedule within your website. So you want to answer that question for someone landing on your site is how can they actually book an inspection? And then I think it's really, those are the big three questions you want to answer within your easy navigation. And I promise I'll get into how to put this all together. But there are two others that I think are really important. And it's, if I'm a home buyer and I have more questions, how can I actually get in touch with a real human? So how can I say email you or call you, or maybe you even have a website that has a chat option, something like that. And then lastly, if I'm really motivated, I might want to know about any resources I can read and consume to learn more. Right? And that all comes into your navigation. And with easy navigation, you want to provide answers to all of those common questions. So of course you'll have your homepage, but I pulled this as an example because you can see up here, if I'm looking at this site, I can see exactly what the full services are. I see there's a button to contact. I see there's an about page and a testimonials page. And both of those will probably answer my questions about whether I can trust this person for an inspection. And then, of course, there's the big schedule CTA, and then we have additional resources. So when you're putting together your website navigation, thinking about what pages you actually include on that top nav, I really encourage you all to approach it from an idea of, okay, what questions do I need to answer of a potential home buyer or a potential agent, if you have a lot of agents coming to your website? And then think about that as you actually create the website pages you'll have and display. And with that, just a super quick note on easy navigation and URL paths. So I won't get too technical with this, but it makes sense to keep your actual URLs pretty easy, and good web designers will help you with this and do this for you. But for Google's purposes and being able to actually index and show those website pages if they were to rank outside of your homepage, you really want the URLs to be intuitive. So for example, your services page would just be yourinspectioncompany.com/services, etc., etc. All right, and then something else that's really important when we think about how we're actually going to get someone to book with you from your website is social proof. And as I just talked about, like, online reviews and testimonials are hugely important. And, you know, the internet can feel pretty anonymous. And as I mentioned right in the beginning, a website is likely going to be the first interaction a client has with you. And so you really want to be focusing on any way you can show that people have had great experiences with your company and that you're someone who can be trusted. So let's talk about what this might look like for you. I think for home inspectors, the biggest things that you'll need to put on like a testimonials or a reviews page or on your websites are any actual written reviews you have from customers and any ratings. So like, for example, on your Google My Business page, if you have, you know, a couple hundred 5-star reviews, you'll want to call that on your website. And then also certifications. So like, are you licensed? Do you have any InterNACHI certifications? What continuing education have you completed? All of these together will show a home buyer that, like, yeah, okay, this person is trustworthy. This person has a lot of experience. And, you know, buying a home is a huge deal. Getting it inspected is a very big part of that process. And you want to show a nervous home buyer that, like, you're the guy or gal for them. So social proof is how we're going to do that. And yeah, just as I mentioned, great place to start is putting your reviews from clients. So whether that's Google reviews, Spectora reviews, Yelp reviews, anywhere you might have some review written down, actually putting that on a page on your website. And then second is certifications and accolades, as we just mentioned, like InterNACHI certifications and badges are excellent for that. And the nice thing there is they also look really visually nice, so they'll look great on your website. Tying into the trust piece, and I think this one might go without saying, but it might not, so we'll say it anyway. Show your face. You don't want someone who lands on your site feeling like you're in witness protection mode or anything like that, because the internet feels really anonymous, and actually showing your face will help them, a client landing on your website, feel like they can get to know you, right? And it just makes sense. Like if you have a little bit about you, and if they can see who they're talking to, it will make a more personal connection, and they're not going to feel like it's just this sterile business that they're booking with. They'll have an actual relationship with you. So it's really important to build trust. And I was looking into some studies before that show like having a picture of yourself on your site actually simulates eye contact, and eye contact is really important for building trust. So when someone's booking with you online and you can't get that actual eye contact, have a picture of yourself just looking at them and smiling, looking friendly. It can go a long way. Second thing is, again, it just adds a personal touch, and it can really set you apart from anyone else they might be looking at. So for example, like as humans, we really like connection. So if a client is deciding between you and a different home inspection company, and you have some great photos of you and your team, and they feel like they can actually get to know you a little bit, it might separate you a bit from your competitors. Then lastly, as storytelling, as humans, we love stories. Showing your face can just add a little bit to your story. And, you might want to put this in your about section, and there are huge bonus points if in your about section, you can tell a bit of a compelling story, maybe about why you like home inspections, why you got into the industry, why you're qualified. And it will really just help anyone who lands on your site feel like there's an actual real person there. All right, and then one important thing that I want to touch on is on the note of being a real human. Don't make your clients feel like it's impossible to talk to a real human. And what I mean by that is your contact info should be easily accessible to every page. And a real human doesn't mean you have to be picking up the phone 24/7, but they should have the ability to either call you, maybe to text you, maybe even to have a little message bot that, like our chat bot that you can write into, anything like that, just in case they do have more questions, because you wouldn't want a client to land on your site, have questions about the home inspection, and then not have any way to get those answered. And with that, that's really the most important notes we need to hit when we talk about actually converting anyone who lands on your website to a booked client. The last thing we'll talk about in this, before we dive into looking at an actual website, is just pages every home inspector, every home inspector should have on their site. And this really ties back to like, what questions do we want to answer? So we'll go through this pretty quickly. Before we get into it, there is no like one perfect way to structure a site. You'll offer different services, you'll have different needs. You might want to phrase some of these differently, but there are questions you want to answer. So just know as I'm going through this, feel free to make it your own, but this is what we've seen really work for home inspectors who have great sites, and what you might want to think about including if you haven't built a site yet, or if you're looking to revamp your site a little. So with that first page, obviously everyone will have this is your homepage, and oftentimes it's the page you'll link from your Google business profile. It's the page where the URL will literally just be your website. And it's the page that's most likely to rank on Google, so it will likely be the first page a client will land on. What's important here is you really don't want it to fall flat, right? You want someone landing on your homepage to feel like they have a good idea of your company and of you, and it should actually be that first page that gets them to feel like they might want to book an inspection. So a homepage should have, to the right, you can see a place that's Spector's online scheduler, but a brief blurb about your company, a compelling story about why your client should book with you. So for example, this would be a great place to call out your unique value propositions. If If you offer personalized walkthroughs of the report that you'll actually like sit down with the client and go through it with them, or if you just offer something really special about your inspection, or if you're available, 24/7 to call that out there, because that will set you apart from other inspection companies they're looking at. Then, of course, as we mentioned in the beginning, there should be a way to book an inspection on your homepage. We recommend embedding your Spectora online scheduler, and then there should also be contact information. Next page that's really important is services and fees. So a page like this should obviously have each service you offer. And then something I really like and think is just hugely important to hit on here is there should be a description of each service with a compelling why. And what I mean by that is an answer to why is it important for a homeowner to book this service. So while you know what radon is, what sewer scope is, or any other add-on or ancillary service you offer, even a residential home inspection, keep in mind that the home buyer probably might not even know what that is beyond the name of the service you're offering, and they likely don't know why they need it. So if you can provide just anything that can get them in that headspace, you can even link out to blog posts if you have them. That's really important to include with your services. And then again, from there, you should have easy booking with each services. And then if you choose to display pricing, you should have the price listed, or you can have the option to get a quote. As we talked about earlier, you should definitely have an about page. An about page should have your company mission or vision, your background, so something that will let the client see what makes you specifically a good home inspector, and then photos of you and your team. If you're not a one-man operation, include that as well. Again, really just important for a client to be able to feel like they can get to know you and your company a little bit before they book. Then you also want a testimonials and reviews page. And I see a lot of home inspector websites without this, and I just think it's really important. I actually have Casey Bartley's pulled up here. He, if you don't know him, he's fantastic. But what I really, really like about his reviews page is it opens with the number of 5-star reviews he has, which if you have a high volume, I'd say like over 100, do list that on your website, because that's something that clients will consider, like how many good reviews do you have, not just 3 or 4 5-star reviews. And then the second thing he does really well here is he has a CTA to leave a review. So he links out to both Google and Facebook. I'd say if you're just getting started with the reviews, definitely push them to Google first, because that's what will matter most in terms of SEO and where clients are likely seeing reviews first. And then the last thing he has here is all of these wonderful reviews actually written out and from like real people with the date they left them. And I think that's fantastic, because anyone coming to your site can see, or anyone coming to KC's site can see, there's just a plethora of people who have had such an excellent experience working with him. And again, based on those review statistics, knowing almost every single person booking online is going to look for and read reviews, and that a lot of people trust reviews so much, I think this is a really important page that you don't want to leave off of your website. Then lastly, if you have any resources to offer, which I promise you probably do, you're going to want a page for that. So that could be anything like sample reports, your blog, frequently asked questions, which is one that I see a lot that I love, is just a page that answers any frequently asked questions that home buyers have about the inspection process. I think that's especially great if you work with a lot of first-time buyers who have never done this before. And then lastly, anything else a home buyer might want to know before or after booking an inspection. So the resources page is where you can have fun with it. There's probably, other than your sample reports, no one thing you should have here, but it's nice to add something a little extra. And especially like if you do have a blog, that's a great place to link it from. All right, and with that said, let's look at a real example of this. I chose this randomly based on what you all submitted. And so thank you, Davis Inspection Group. Before we get into this, I just want to say this is an awesome site. It's really, really great. And any critique James and I give here is just really meant to help you all learn. It's going to be constructive. But before we even get into it, I just want to say this is an awesome start. So let's scroll through. Are you noticing anything right away, James, that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think an interesting thing to maybe consider, and we talk about CTAs and what's kind of blending in, what's not blending in. Um, Quick story from my past, and I've told this on another webinar, so apologies. But back in the day, I had a website. It had a similar kind of layout like this, where there were two calls to action, one call to action, not two, in the masthead section, which is the certified home inspector ensuring your safety. I went to my designer and I asked him for like 5 different colors of buttons. He was mad at me that day, and he gave me I think he gave me 3 back, so that was a problem to begin with. But 2 of them just matched our website. We had like a red, black, gray was kind of our main colors. So he gave me like a red and a gray. And then he also gave me this really horrible orange color. It was just ugly as can be. And I think that was a bit of him just sort of socking one to me. But we decided to test all 3, and we put it on the website, had all 3, scientifically tested. And as people are coming to the website, what we've realized is that really ugly bright orange button on a website that it looked terrible on actually increased the amount of people clicking on that button by 160+%. And if you think about that, if you were able to increase just by changing the color of a button on your website, the number of people who book inspections with you by 160%, would you do that? Of course you would, right? So one area that I would say for this is maybe brighten up some of these calls to action, especially that schedule now. If you have an online scheduling capability, that one you'd much prefer having somebody schedule online than taking up your time on a call. So you might want to make that pop a little bit more.
Absolutely. And that's a crazy story, but I think it's so true. If you're in a design mind, you might want to do what's prettiest, but I think that just illustrates what we were talking about earlier, like that your CTA should be what really stands out on the page, and it's going to be most successful when it's big and it's bright. So with that said, something I really love here and just want to call good attention to is these badges right off the beginning. That's an awesome way to work in social proof before anyone even has to scroll much at all. So I do love that. Second thing, I don't know about you, James. I love this home inspection in action section, but I almost think it could move a little bit down on the page. So for example, I was looking earlier, and Tyler, you have this amazing picture of yourself and your dog, who was just adorable, by the way. And one of the better about sections I've ever seen. I like that you call attention to how long you've been in the more technical industry and all of the expertise you're bringing to the home inspection. I feel like from this, I really get to know you. I want this to be the second thing you see on a page, because what that does is shows me your face right away and gives me a reason to trust you. Whereas this home inspection in action is cool, but as someone who, like, for real, I'm not just pretending I've never bought a home before, I've never gotten a home inspection, I don't know exactly what I'm looking at here, so that might be something nice to have a little further down the page.
Yeah, totally agree on my end with that. I think there's a lot of good information here, but rearranging it so people get to know you first. And obviously, whether that's really your cute dog there or a stunt dog, that's another way just to make people like you, is a really good picture of you with a pet like that. That's gonna make people, as long as they're dog people, really like it.
Absolutely. Something else I love that I think is just really awesome is this tips for home buyers and a free downloadable guide. I don't want to click through this right now and take us off of the site. I don't know if you get someone to email there for marketing purposes. If you do, that's awesome. But I love that right away we're providing value to the home buyer. And this is something I haven't seen a lot. So I think this is a great example of like putting a unique value proposition on your homepage. As a home buyer, I'd land on this and be like, wow, this guy really cares about actually giving me a good experience and helping me beyond just the first home inspection, which builds trust. So I do love that. Something I want to call out and that I'm noticing as I'm scrolling through is that this top bar with home qualifications, services, schedule now does not scroll with me. I just want to quickly call attention to the fact that I would ideally like that to scroll with me, because again, if you're not putting CTAs to schedule or book, you'd want that to at least have that schedule now follow you throughout the page. And then second, it again plays into the easy navigation aspect. Like if that bar isn't scrolling with me, the only option I have is just keep scrolling down, which is fine, but it doesn't actually get me to booking a service or doing anything else that you would want to get a client to from this top menu. Great. Let's see. Do we want to click into some of these other pages here, James? I can do that.
Yeah, before we do that, just one other thing just to think of, and this is maybe a little bit on the nitpicky side. And this is also something that I understand is even, working for bigger companies, like it's sometimes not possible. But when you look at the Davis logo, which I really like, one thing is this is more of like a vertical logo. If you had a version that was more horizontal, that could make this section a little bit skinnier, it might help out. And especially if you go to a sort of a scrolling header that follows you down the page, it would be really nice if that was more horizontal and it took up less space, so you would have more sort of real estate for your content if that again was following you down the page.
Yeah, makes total sense. All right, let's click into qualifications here. I do like this right away, and having qualifications, I mean, it shows that you've really done your work. You can see here that you're InterNACHI certified, which I really like. Ideally, maybe if you guys can see, I'm having to scroll a little bit to read all of this. Making this section just a little shorter might be good, so you can have all of the qualifications above the fold. And I mean, above the fold, I guess I should quickly explain. Back in the day of paper, newspapers folded, and above the fold is what you'd see before you had to unfold. Now what we mean is above the scroll. So what can you see on a page before you scroll? So ideally, I would like to see this whole little paragraph here before I have to scroll.
Another thing too with this, and this is kind of going back to the way that people read web pages, is this is a lot of content smashed together with no breaks. Obviously, it's very good content, but if there's a way to either shorten it or break it up a little bit so it's a little bit easier for people to read, it may increase the amount of people reading it. I will say something to remember with websites is there are cases where you don't even really care if somebody fully reads all the text. You might just want them to get the gist that, like, hey, I'm certified, it's super trusted organization, it means I'm awesome, and then move on. So maybe that's the point here. But I would just keep in mind, sometimes if you put way too much text together, it's overwhelming on eyes, especially with a background like this behind it. So the chances of somebody fully reading this is low, but maybe that's the point. Maybe you don't need them to read everything.
Yeah, and I will say, someone who hasn't heard of InterNACHI before may not even really care, but just showing that you have it, as James was saying, is still important, even if they're just like, oh, cool, he's certified, great. And I like the actual certifications here. That's nice. Definitely adds an element of trust as well. And then, yeah, this is awesome. Comprehensive property inspection services. Yeah, this is all good stuff. I like the level of trust. Like if someone's scrolling down this page, they keep just seeing more reasons to trust you. And then lastly, yeah, I was talking about these in the presentation, these little inspector certifications that are just such nice badges you can put on your website. I love including these, and I like including these at the bottom. I think that the way you've ordered this page is really nice. One thing that's a little weird to me is that these have their own internal scroll. I think just for a website experience, you could probably see if you could display them all at once together so they're not having to scroll within the page. I don't know if the way I explain that just makes sense. What do you think, James?
Yeah. I mean, so what this is called, and this is slightly technical, so apologize, but it's called an iframe. And basically what it is it's basically you putting another web page inside of a web page. And things like the scheduler that we have for our websites, that actually is iframed in. But the thing is it's iframed in with the proper height put in with it. So there's sort of parameters you can put in with the iframe that says make it this big. What's happening here is that window size of the iframe isn't big enough, and that's why it's causing this internal scroll. So shouldn't be a huge thing to fix, but definitely it's just kind of an odd experience. And as you're kind of scrolling with your mouse, the fact that if your mouse is in that section and then a separate part of the page scrolls but not the full page, it just can get a little bit confusing. Well, is it going to lose you business? No, but from a general, web design standpoint, it's fixable. It's probably something to get checked.
Absolutely. Yeah, you explained that way better than I did, so thank you for that. And Tyler, I don't know if you designed this site yourself or if someone else designed it for you, but either way, everything we're talking about should be easy fixes that you can either fix yourself or work with your web designer to fix. Great. I want to super quickly, keeping in mind we need to leave some time for Q&A, just go through the inspection services, because I really, really like how you've laid this out. It looks like you offer a lot here. I like the little images. I think that this is a nice page. Again, like, I wish the CTAs maybe popped a little bit more, but I think overall this is a really good experience and nice work here. I think we're not going to read them out loud for the sake of time, but you have really great descriptions here of what the services are and why a home buyer should book with them. So nice job. Great. Is there anything else you want to get into with this site, James, or should we go ahead and jump into Q&A?
Yeah, I think and this is just just kind of a small trick to think about. When you have a website that is kind of a longer page like this, sometimes between these page sections, if you can get an element that looks like a downward facing arrow put between each section, it actually encourages people to continue to scroll. So and it may not be this page that you want somebody to like go all the way through, but if you have a page that has a lot of stuff on it and you want them to see it all, putting little indications like arrows can actually increase the chances of people knowing. Again, it's this subtle cue of what to do next. And you'd be really surprised how that can change things on a website and behavior on a website, because people are like, oh, I just want to see where that arrow is going. It's funny, and like we're some very basic creatures, I would say, at times with stuff like this. But it is kind of another trick that web designers can use to get your eyes and your scroll wheel doing the right thing.
Absolutely. Good call on that. I think that's, yeah, little things like that you wouldn't think about if you haven't spent a lot of time designing and working with websites. It's just really interesting to actually think about how, as a human, like, you move through a website and how we're all pretty easily trickable, for lack of a better word. If you know what to do, you can get someone to do what you want them to do. So
yeah.
And
I think that's a really good point. I think after this webinar, if everybody if you have a bit of time and you're not doing inspections or kind of getting, you have a few minutes, or just the next time you're on the web, because let's face it, we're all going to be scrolling on some website at some point today. Take the time to kind of look at the way that you're interacting with a website and pay attention to that. And the more you pay attention to it, I think the more you'll start realizing, oh, there's maybe some tweaks and tunes that I could do to my site.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's everyone's homework. With that, thank you so much for letting us use your site. I really appreciate it. And overall, you've done really great work. And I hope that you guys have all learned something today. Let's get into questions.
All right, Q&A time. This is going back to the start. We had Brian asking, how necessary is it to have a blog on your website?
It's a really good question. I'd say when you're first building a website, you're probably not going to have time to build a blog. And especially if you're a newer inspector and you're just building up your web presence, focus on having a nice site first. Focus on your Google business profile. And those are the things that are really going to move the needle. However, when you do have time, a blog is great. And there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, each blog post you write gives you another opportunity to rank on Google. So if you're answering questions such as like, what should a home buyer expect from a home inspection, talking about any common defects that a home buyer in your area would find in a home inspection, how to read your home inspection report, any of those kinds of questions are high intent blog posts that you can write to get someone who wants to book an inspection on your site. And then you can also use your blog posts outside of SEO purposes. So for example, and this is like my favorite that I've seen, let's say you offer a radon upsell, write a full blog post about radon, like why it's a concern for the home buyer, what a radon test looks like, all of that good stuff. And then you can actually use that blog post in, your upsell email or however you're upselling that service to add a little bit more context. So I'd say it is important to have a blog, but it's not necessarily the first thing you need to focus on when you're building your website. It will help your marketing, but there are other things to focus on first, like your reviews and just having a solid site.
Awesome. Next up, we have Daniel. Is writing in and saying, and this is really cool that they're doing this. They have a radio show podcast that they do weekly. What's the best place to put that on your website?
First of all, that's incredible. I love that. I would put that under resources, or you can put that on your homepage even if you want, maybe down below anything about booking an inspection about your company. Or if it's something that you really want to call people's attention to, you can put that in like a place to get to where you can watch, listen, or view that. You can put that in the top navigation of your website so they could click into a page. Yeah, I'd say that's your choice, but that's freaking awesome. I love it.
Awesome. This is a kind of a fun one. Do I really need to put my phone number on my website? I'm worried that it's going to cause a bunch of spam phone calls from bots reading the web and stealing my number.
It's a great question. I would say yes, because you want someone to be able to get in touch with your office. And obviously, if you're a one-man shop and this is just your personal phone number, yes, that can get annoying, but it's really important to have that level of customer service where someone from your website can easily find a way to contact you or your business and get answers to any questions they may have. And I think honestly, it's probably a hindrance to you if you don't have an easy way to contact you. Now, could this be your email? Maybe, but people prefer phone calls. It could remove or add a barrier to someone actually booking with you, which would mean less business. So I'd say, yes, it's important to have your phone number, even though it sucks.
And I would agree. You got to do it. And yeah, spam is a way of life, unfortunately.
Yes.
Let's see here. We had a question, and I think we answered from Tina around just the call to action. How much should it match your color scheme? It's kind of up to you, but some of those odder ones can do a good job. Somebody's asking that, so they outsource their radon to a friend. This is from Chuck. They outsource radon to a friend. Should they actually include that on their website, even though they're not doing it themselves?
Good question. I honestly don't have a great answer to this. I would say up to you, and still offer it because you're getting some of the revenue. I'd assume you want to market that. Yeah, I'm going back on my answer. Absolutely, you're going to want to list that on your site, and you can note that you're contracting it out. What do you think there, James?
Yeah, I think it's totally fine to put it on your website, and I think having people generally are looking for some sort of a one-stop shop for things. And so if that one-stop shop, if you're not that, in a lot of cases, they may go with somebody else. So I think when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, like people, and we just had this on a podcast, you don't have to do the radon for yourself, obviously, especially if you're in a rural area, like there's a lot of driving involved with that. So, it's still a service that you can provide, even if you're outsourcing it. So I would say include anything you do outsourced on the site, so people know that you have a wider range of services to select from, so they don't end up going with a competitor that has those services as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Great answer.
Somebody sounds like they're maybe trying to build a website themselves or build out their website. They're saying that they're kind of stuck because they're just not good at writing stuff. Should they use AI to help with that?
Yes, I would say, writing, it's obviously, that's tough. Yes, use AI. I always hesitate to recommend it fully because you'll need to fact check anything you're putting on with AI and you want it to sound like a real human voice. That said, I use ChatGPT to help with my writing all the time, especially when I am feeling a little bit stuck in the brainstorming stage or just really need some help rephrasing something. So yes, I would say use AI to write it, but make sure anything you use AI for, you're proofreading it like 4 times. And if you can, add some of your own personality or writing style in after you get the initial text generated, then please do that, just so it doesn't sound like AI wrote it completely. Because I think what we'll all start to realize the more we interact with AI at the stage it's at now, once you realize that you're reading AI, it's really hard to stop noticing that. So that's my recommendation. Yes, use it to help you write. It's an awesome tool, but make sure you're adding a little bit of your own personal touch and fact checking everything that AI creates, because it's not perfect, just like we're not.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been hearing as well. There's more and more people saying that it's just becoming almost plainly obvious. It's like AI has almost a unique writing style you can pick up on. And then, yeah, once you notice it, you can't stop noticing it. And then you start really realizing, I think recently we've literally got like a job cover letter, and I swear you just read it and you're like, that's got to be AI. Like
Yeah.
it's just one of those things that people are getting more savvy about. So good to know. Matthew actually just kind of sharing his experience, going back to the phone number question. He's saying that he just got a second cell phone for his business. That makes a lot of sense, I think, as well as just like an inspecting phone. So that's the way he's kind of thinking about, like, hey, I just have a different number. It's not my personal, and that's how he's making his way through it.
Totally. Yeah. I'd say that will probably make your experience 10 times better if you're able to do that, and can probably make you feel more comfortable putting your number on your site if it's not, your personal cell.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Next up, Dan is asking, and this is a great question. He's newer in the business. He doesn't have a ton of reviews on Google. How many reviews do you need to have before you start putting those reviews, like the star rating, on your website?
So I think this is a complicated question because there are a couple things you can do for here when you're starting out. First thing I would do, instead of saying the star review, if it's lower than 4.5, 5 stars, is put the actual positive review text. And let's say you have 3 reviews on Google. You can just, if they're positive, obviously you don't want to put negative reviews on your site. But if you have 3 good reviews, just take the text and either, if you're designing it yourself or working with a web designer, ask them to put it on, and then you can just say, hear from happy clients. You don't have to say how many there are of them if it's only 3, 4, 5, but show that people have worked with you and had a good experience. Second thing is, even if you have, 4 reviews, but your average rating is a 5-star, you can on your website say rated 5 stars on Google, because that's true. You are. I just wouldn't say the number of reviews. And that's a really important note, as I called out on Casey Bartley's website earlier, how he has like, over 500 5-star reviews on Google, or whatever ridiculous number that is. You probably won't be there, especially if you're first starting out. But once you get to over 100, that's when you can call out the number. Before that, I'd just say rated 5 stars on Google, or even just having the review text is more than enough.
Awesome.
Any opinions on that, James? Or
No, I think you're dead on. I mean, there's an element, let's face it, when you start in any business, there's that feeling of there's a little bit of fake it till you make it. Everybody has to have a first inspection they do. Everybody has to have a first review. The text of those reviews is fantastic. You have 3 reviews, they're all 5-star, they're glowing, and people have typed nice things. Put it on your website. But otherwise, it'll take time to build that up. Also understand that reviews, once you get that first review, the second review is going to come a lot easier. And so the more reviews you get, the more people are going to leave reviews. So it's going to take some time, but really important to have that social proof, as Olivia explained earlier.
totally. And that said, just want to put it out there, make sure you're asking for a review after each and every inspection. I Ideally, you'll do this twice. You'll ask on site, get that verbal yes that they'll leave you a review, because then the client will feel obligated to leave you a review. And then you should have some kind of follow-up email or text afterwards. I mean, we've talked about why reviews are important. You're probably sick of hearing us say it, but it is really important. And people are more naturally inclined to want to leave a negative review if they had a bad experience. So that's why you need to ask for every inspection, because hopefully most of your clients are having good experiences and they might just need that little reminder to leave a review. So I'll get off my review high horse now, but I just want to make sure everyone is doing that, because that's how you really build up that strong presence, is by asking. People aren't necessarily going to think to do it just out of the goodness of their heart. Some might, but not all.
Totally. Great. And then I think we got time for like maybe one more question. And this is a really good one too. Do I really need to publish my pricing on my website? It just seems like a great way for my competitor to know what I'm charging and to undercut me.
I'd say, look, I know this is a debate that inspectors have. I think putting pricing on your website is important, because if you think about the experience, or at least having the option to get a quote, that experience is really important for the client, because if I'm not going to book something without knowing about how much it's going to cost me. So actually the website we looked at earlier, when it was like 400 up for a residential inspection, like I think that was a great way of putting it. Second is, obviously, yeah, your competitors can look at this, they can price their inspections $5 less, whatever. You should be confident enough in your inspection to charge whatever you're going to charge, and have those other things on your website that will set you apart from a competitor who's just trying to undercut you with their price. You can make up for it, and a lot of the time you'll probably weed out the clients who are just getting the cheapest inspection possible. Now, is that to say offering the cheapest inspection possible isn't a strategy that you could do? You totally could, but I am team show your prices on your website. However, if anyone has different experience, I am maybe not the perfect person to answer this question, but that's just what we've seen over seeing inspectors in the industry for years and years.
Yeah, I would just throw in that when you look at the folks, and if you're not listening to the Spectora Spotlight podcast, great place to get a ton of information and kind of hear these stories. But for folks getting started in this industry, or people that have been really successful in the first year or two, you rarely hear that their pricing is the thing that is making them, like low pricing is making them successful. Usually they're actually charging more than most folks. They're just better at delivering value and explaining that value. So I would highly recommend put your pricing on a web page. People want to know what you charge. If they're individuals at $5 or $10 in the process of buying a $400,000 house is really going to throw them off, like maybe that's not the right customer for you to begin with.
That is an incredible point. And I think with that, we're just about at time. So if we didn't get your question answered, you can feel free to email personally. I'm olivia@spectora.com, and we'll get that question answered for you. With that said, thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. This was a fun one to put together, and I think it's just the perfect time to focus on making sure your website's in the best shape possible as we go into 2024. Maybe you have fewer inspections right now, so take some time and just focus on that website. And thank you again for coming.
Thanks, everybody.